Sometimes the people who owe you the most will ask for more until you have nothing left but your silence. And then finally, your power. Hey guys, tonight we witness a betrayal so cold, so meticulously planned, it could have broken anyone. A daughter who paid for the house only to be erased from the family who lived in it. But what they didn't see coming was her silence becoming strategy. This is not just a story of revenge, it's a reckoning. You're watching Revenge Stories 94, and this is one of our most powerful episodes yet. So before you get comfortable, like and subscribe if you believe in justice told quietly. Now dim the lights. This lesson unfolds slowly and beautifully, the window I should have never opened. It was Christmas Eve in Orange County, and I was out in the cold, hanging the last string of lights along the garden fence. My fingers were numb, but I didn't mind. I had planned every detail of the evening down to the ribbon colors and oven timer. The soft hum of Nat King Cole drifted through the kitchen window, and I smiled, imagining how proud Mom would be when she saw everything glowing, like one of those Hallmark commercials she secretly loved. But then I heard it, not the music, not the wind, her voice, Melissa. If Mom doesn't make Ava pay for the entire renovation, she said, her voice flat and sharp, then what the hell are we even keeping her around for? I froze. The curtain was slightly open. The glass caught the reflection in my face, pale, stunned like I was watching someone else's life. But I wasn't. I was living it. Mom Carolyn didn't argue. She didn't even hesitate. She just exhaled that breathy laugh she used when she was pretending to care. Don't worry, she said. Everything's already arranged. The estate, the house, the beach property, everything's going to you. She doesn't need to know yet. This house is just a way to keep her invested. That girl still thinks love is earned through labor. Melissa snorted. She walks around with her stupid hard hat. Like that makes her someone. Let her pay the bill and then cut her out for good. I stood there like a statue, one hand still gripping the stapler, the other clutching the string of lights. My knuckles were white, my ears were ringing. The lights I'd strung began to blink, mocking me with artificial cheer. They laughed, they toasted, they didn't know it, I was right outside the window. It's strange the things that go silent first. It wasn't the wind, not the music. It was the part of me that still believed I belonged. They didn't think I was family. They thought I was a service, a wallet, a walking renovation fund with a decent attitude and no legal protection. I didn't go inside. I didn't confront them. I stood there in the dark until the numbness spread from my fingers to my spine. I didn't even feel the cold anymore. I felt clarity, and it was colder than any California winter I'd ever known. Then slowly I closed the window, as if shutting the door on 36 years of unpaid effort and borrowed love. That night I didn't cry. I baked the cookies, I refilled the wine, I adjusted the centerpiece, and I smiled because something inside me had snapped clean, and that kind of break, it doesn't scream. It builds. Her cake my coffin. Melissa always loved attention. Ever since we were little, she was the girl with the sparkly dresses and dramatic entrances, always twirling for applause, always knowing when to tilt her head and fake a fragile smile. Me, I was the one holding the camera, the one sweeping up after the confetti had fallen. So when her 40th birthday rolled around, it wasn't just a party. It was a full production. Satin table runners, imported orchids, a champagne fountain. And of course the cake, 5 tiers of sugar, an ego topped with gold leaf, and a monogram M so large it needed reinforcement. And guess who planned every detail I did, just like I always had. I remember sitting in the corner of the dining room that night, nursing a glass of Pinot Grigio I didn't even want. My feet ached from setting up chairs, and my apron still smelled like burnt rosemary from the lamb I had overcooked by 7 minutes because Mom insisted on changing the oven temperature mid-roast. Again, Melissa glided through the room like she owned the air. Her dress sparkled like a knife under the chandelier. Guests fawned over her. Even Bruce, her husband, whom I had caught yawning into his phone minutes earlier, now smiled like a campaign poster. No one looked at me, no one thanked me, except Dad. He gave me a small nod from across the room, like he saw me for the first time all night. But even that felt delayed, not quite enough. Somewhere between the second toast and the third course, I looked down at the silver-plated cutlery and saw my reflection in the spoon. It's tired, washed out, dull eyes, and a forced smile. I did not recognize her. I had spent $57,450 renovating this house. New floors, new lighting, new kitchen cabinetry. I chose every tile. I negotiated with every contractor. I covered the permits with my own money, money saved from late night freelance design jobs and stripped down vacations, and for what Moebi talked about like a dog behind my back to be cut out of the very will that should have held my name. The pain wasn't new, but that night it was dressed in sequins and served with hors d'oeuvres. I kept thinking about the time I was 7. Melissa had gotten a Barbie dream house for her birthday. I didn't get one, so I built one out of cardboard and popsicle sticks. I even made little curtains from old socks. I was so proud. I showed it to Mom. She laughed and said it looked like something a janitor's kid would make. I remember thinking, but aren't we the same kind of kid? Apparently not. Apparently, Melissa had always been the chosen one, and I had always been the helper, the filler, the one who got handed the camera so I wouldn't ruin the photo. I stared at her that night as she posed for pictures in front of the fireplace I installed. The irony hit me like a slow wave. I had built the backdrop for my own erasure. Every brick, every light bulb, my handiwork, my silence, my undoing. Mom walked past me and adjusted the ribbon on Melissa's gift pile. Ava, don't forget to bring out the candles, she said without even looking at me. As if I was the housekeeper, as if I hadn't poured everything I had into this evening, into this family. I went to the kitchen, not to get the candles, just to breathe. I leaned against the sink, staring out the window, into the night. The same backyard I had spent hours mulching and planting and designing was now filled with laughter I wasn't part of. I pressed my palms against the cool granite countertop granite I had chosen installed, sealed. A part of me wanted to walk out, just walk away and let the party implode without me. But then I remembered the emails, the recordings, the contract I had signed too eagerly, the documents I was preparing, the folder growing heavier by the day. And I smiled. Not a sweet smile, not even a bitter one, just a quiet curve of the lips that said, "You're not a guest in this house, you're the builder. You don't walk away from a building you designed. You wait until the foundation gives way on your terms." So I lit the candles, I brought out the cake, and I watched Melissa blow them out like a queen. She didn't know the candles were the only things she'd extinguish that night without consequences. They thought I'd never read the fine print. People think revenge starts with rage, that it boils over like a pot of soup you forgot on the stove. But mine started with silence. Not because I was scared, but because I finally understood that making noise only feeds them. Silence, though, silence disarms. It makes people comfortable, careless, and careless people leave breadcrumbs. So I became very quiet. After Melissa's birthday, I returned to my room and opened the drawer where I had started collecting things. Not memories, proof. Receipts from the renovation, copies of email threads, photos of everything I built with timestamps. I knew they thought I would never check the details. That's the thing about people who rely on your kindness. They assume you won't notice they're stealing from you. But I'm in construction. I've read enough fine print to know the devil never hides in the dramatic lines. He waits in the margins. 3 years ago, when the renovation project began, Mom had asked me to sign a contract to help speed things up with the permit office. She said it would save us time. I didn't read it. I was too eager to help, too eager to matter. And because I didn't read it, I signed away ownership rights to everything. So technically, I wasn't just excluded from the will. I had funded improvements on a property I had no claim to. A sucker move, a rookie mistake, but one I could now correct not by erasing it, but by documenting every painful inch of it. I began mapping out what I now call the audit of betrayal, a spreadsheet that covered every dollar, every nail, every gallon of paint. I found the voice memos I had saved when Mom gave me instructions over the phone. I downloaded app logs showing contractor calls made from my phone. I categorized photos by project phase. Then I cross-referenced each cost with market rates to prove I hadn't just donated labor. I had increased the home's value by over $120,000. And yet I wasn't even family enough to inherit the guest towels. Funny, right? Each night, I'd finish my regular work, then spend hours at the dining table, ironic, since it was the same table they laughed over during Melissa's party. I'd sit there polishing the edges of truth like a craftsman smoothing rough timber. I wasn't building a case, I was building a reckoning. My hand smelled like sawdust ink printer, toner, and resolve. Still, I never said a word. They thought I was distracted by new project bids. They thought I was back to being helpful Ava. They didn't know that behind my tired nods and polite smiles, I was documenting every careless whisper. Mom grew twitchier. She'd lower her phone whenever I entered the room. Melissa, too, seemed more on edge, often whispering behind closed doors. I didn't press, I didn't flinch. I wanted them to believe I was soft again. But softness is not the same as surrender. It's the calm before precision, and precision was where I thrived. I bought a new tablet, one no one in the house had ever seen. I uploaded files onto it, organized into folders, financial to property, affair, communications. I even created backups, one on the cloud, one in a flash drive hidden inside a hollowed out chisel in my workshop. I started seeing everything like a blueprint again, clean, logical, ruthless. I knew the timeline, I knew the angles. All that remained was the right moment, the right pressure point. That's when I remembered what Mom said during the conversation I overheard. This house is just a way to keep her invested. So I thought, let's make the house the let them decorate it, let them invite guests, let them toast, let them feel untouchable, and then let the foundation crack underneath their heels. Melissa's 40th had been their big moment, but the next celebration, that would be mine. Not a party, an unveiling of every lie they told, every penny they took, every smile they faked, and I would deliver it not with shouting, not with vengeance, but with stillness, the kind of stillness that only comes from watching your plans fit perfectly into place, the kind that makes people stop laughing mid-sentence and realize the joke was never on you, it was on them. My mother's other face. I used to think my mother was made of marble, polished, cold, unbreakable, the kind of woman who always smelled like lavender and finality. Carolyn Sanders didn't raise children, she curated appearances. She had two faces, one for the neighborhood, the ever elegant woman in red lipstick with the charming daughters, and one for us, silent, transactional, critical. Growing up, I used to watch her apply lipstick like a ritual, perfect symmetry, slow, calculated strokes, as if painting on power. But behind that red was a mouth that could cut through confidence like glass. And behind her locked office door, a second life. It began with the tension, the sudden shift in her posture when I entered a room, the way she'd angle her screen away from me, the polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. At first, I chalked it up to age, fatigue, the ordinary distance between mothers and daughters, but it wasn't distance, it was hiding. One night while she was asleep, I crept into her office. My fingers trembled a little as I touched her keyboard, an odd sensation for someone so used to power tools. She'd never had a password before, but now there was one. The first two guesses failed. On the third, I tried my own birthday. The screen unlocked. I stared at it, stunned not by the irony, but by the ache. My mother, who hadn't remembered my graduation date without a calendar reminder, had set my birthday as the lock code, maybe as a decoy, maybe as a joke, maybe because deep down she knew I'd be the one to open it. Her inbox was a vault, 3 years of emails with someone named Martin Hale. I didn't recognize the name at first, but the photos, the tone of the emails, the casual use of R for Robert, my father, and phrases like, "Does R suspect anything?" told me more than I wanted to know. Martin Hale had been my father's best friend since college. He was also her lover. They had stayed in high-end hotels across Napa Valley, Carmel, Seattle. Photos of wine tastings, fireplaces, even one of them clinking glasses under a tree I recognized from a vacation we all took together when I thought we were just bonding over Pinot and grilled salmon. Turned out I was footing the bill for a romance novel that didn't include my father. I scrolled deeper. They talked about next steps, about how Melissa would handle the transfer paperwork, about selling the Jackson Hole property after the divorce was finalized, about Oregon. They were planning an escape. Without us, without me. I felt the heat rise to my neck, not from jealousy, not even betrayal, but from the sheer absurdity of it all. I had used my hands to rebuild this house. She had used my saving to build her exit. The next day, I looked at her across the breakfast table as she asked me to pass the marmalade. She smiled, I smiled back. Neither of us blinked. She had no idea I knew. I watched it the way her fingers curled around the teaspoon, so elegant, so controlled. But I could see it now how much effort it took her to maintain the illusion. My mother wasn't made of marble. She was made of fractures, sealed and paint tainted over. And I had found the first crack. From that moment, everything she said was theater. Every compliment she gave Melissa, every dig disguised as concern. You should dress up more, Ava. You have such strong features. Translation: You look masculine. Don't overwork yourself, dear. You look tired. Translation: You're never enough. But now I heard the subtext clearly, and I wrote it all down. Every time she mentioned a lunch date, I noted it. Every mention of real estate planning, I recorded. I didn't confront her. Because when people build masts for decades, they don't shatter when you shout. They crumble when you reflect them back. At night, I returned to my files, adding everything I'd learned to the folder labeled Affair. It sat there on my desktop beside the financials and property folders, but to me it was the heaviest, not because of what she did, but because I finally saw her for what she was, not a mother, just a woman, flawed, fearful, cruel in quiet ways, and now exposed in silence. My father slept through it all. If my mother was the storm, then my father was the still lake beneath it, quiet, passive, undisturbed. But still water can drown you just the same. Robert Sanders wasn't a bad man, at least not in the ways people usually mean. He never raised his voice. He never forgot to pay a bill. He showed up to every parent-teacher night and clapped politely at my high school graduation. He bought me my first work boots when I told him I wanted to study architecture instead of law like Melissa, but his silence, that's where the damage lived. There's a kind of wound that doesn't come from being hit, it comes from being unseen. All my life, I tried to earn his attention, his approval. I built birdhouses when I was 10 just to impress him. I helped him fix gutters on the weekends, even when Melissa stayed inside, painting her nails and watching cable reruns. I memorized the names of tools before I could spell my own middle name. And still, all I got were nods. Never a well done, Ava, just a glance, a murmur, sometimes a distracted, "That's nice, kiddo." I think I accepted it because it didn't hurt like Mom's words did. His neglect was quieter, more palatable, but in a way it ran deeper because I kept hoping he'd look up one day and really see me. He didn't. Not until the night everything cracked, the night of the confrontation when I tapped my glass and played those recordings in front of the entire room. His face was a portrait I'll never forget. At first confusion, then dawning, then devastation. He looked at me like I'd just spoken a language he forgot he once knew. When he heard my mother's voice say, "Let her pay for the house renovation," then cut her out, he gripped the edge of the table. When the images flashed photos of Carolyn and Martin at luxury resorts, his hand trembled on the tablecloth. "Martin," he whispered, as if saying the name aloud could somehow make it less true, and "Martin Hale." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The whole room went still. No more glasses clinking, no more artificial cheer, just the weight of a man realizing he'd been asleep for years. Mom tried to speak, reaching across the table toward him. "Robert, I was lonely. You were always buried in your spreadsheets. I needed more." But he pulled his hand away like her fingers burned. He turned to me then, not with anger, not even shame, just regret, deep and hollow, like he had finally looked up and realized I had been carrying the beams of this family while they decorated the walls. I remember thinking, this is the most we've ever spoken without words. In the weeks that followed, he said nothing, no calls, no emails, and honestly, I didn't expect them. I figured he'd retreat to his den of spreadsheets and pretend nothing had happened. But one evening, about 3 weeks after I moved out, my phone rang. It was him. "Ava," he said, and his voice cracked. "I need to talk. Just us." I agreed reluctantly. We met at a quiet coffee shop by Sloan Lake. He wore the same tan jacket he always did in the fall, the same jacket from every birthday photo, every graduation, every backyard barbecue. But he looked older now, smaller. He placed a thick envelope on the table. Inside was everything: financial statements, asset documents, a full audit of the past 10 years. He had hired a private attorney to dig through every deed, every signature, every quiet betrayal. It's worse than you know, he said. As your mother's been planning the divorce for over a year. She and Martin plan to sell the Jackson Hole property right after, the same house you helped restore. I nodded. I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. I want to rewrite the will, he said, not to punish them, but to make things right. I looked at him, the man who had watched from the sidelines, while I was dismantled piece by piece. You don't have to do this for me, I said. I'm not, he replied quietly. I'm doing it for me because I've been a coward, and cowards don't get to die with clean hands. We sat in silence for a while, watching people walk by with their coffees and dogs and headphones, like the world hadn't just cracked open under our feet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to earn anything, and he didn't feel like he needed to explain everything. We were just two flawed people finally facing the same truth. Silence protects no one, not even the quiet ones. The party wasn't for her anymore. I baked the cake myself. Not because Melissa deserved it, but because I wanted every piece of this performance to feel authentic. I marinated the lamb, polished the glassware, fluffed the throw pillows in the living room. Every detail down to the floral centerpieces was perfect. No one suspected a thing. That morning, Carolyn came into the kitchen, dressed in silk, already sipping champagne before 11 a.m. Make sure the chairs are set symmetrically, she said, without looking at me. Melissa gets anxious when things feel off balance. I smiled and said, Of course. Melissa arrived 2 hours before the guests. She was glowing in a designer dress that probably cost more than my entire kitchen renovation. Derek trailed behind her, bored and scrolling on his phone. When she saw me adjusting the table settings, she laughed and said, God, Ava, you always make things look like a hotel catalog. You should have gone into events instead of like dirt and beams. I laughed with her. I even complimented her earrings. But every laugh I offered was a scalpel, every compliment a thread pulled quietly from the hem of their security blanket. They didn't know it, but the walls around them were already crumbling. At exactly 6:45 p.m., the room was packed with their friends, lawyers, dentists, country club chatterboxes. Everyone toasted to Melissa's fabulousness. Someone played a slideshow. There were claps and little polite gasps at vacation photos. I stood in the back, unnoticed as usual. At 7:00 p.m. sharp, I stepped forward and tapped my glass. The clinking stopped. The room fell into that awkward hush reserved for speeches no one expected. I cleared my throat. Before we toast to Melissa's milestone, I said gently, I thought it might be a good time to talk about family, finances, and what we choose to build together. Mom's smile froze. Ava, this isn't, I cut her off. It is Mom, because you always said family matters should be handled privately. And yet, here we are. I pulled the tablet from my bag, no dramatics, no slams, just a calm swipe across the screen as I connected it to the wall-mounted monitor, the very wall I had restructured during the renovation, the drywall I had laid with my own hands. The screen came to life, and so did their worst nightmare. The first audio clip played Mom's voice crisp and cruel. Let her pay for the house. Then we cut her out. We can't let a construction worker drag down the family name. Then Melissa's voice, smug, dismissive. Ava's dumb enough to believe anything. Just smile and nod. I'll handle the paperwork. The room went cold, like someone had opened every window and sucked out the air. My father looked like someone had kicked him in the stomach. His face was pale and for once unreadable. He didn't look at me. He looked at Mom. What kind of joke is this, Carolyn? He asked, voice hollow. But I wasn't finished. I clicked into the next folder affair. Photos of Carolyn and Martin Hale on wine tours and hotel rooms, smiling in bathrobes, began to slide across the screen, one image after another. Dates, locations, expense lines linked to our shared family card. There was a murmur, then gasps. Dad stood up, knocking over his chair. Carolyn, he said, shaking, how long have you been laughing at me? Carolyn tried to cry, and her mascara ran quickly like she had practiced it. Robert, please, you were always so distant. I was lonely, but he didn't move toward her. He just looked at me, and then at the screen again, and that's when I laid the final blueprint. I opened the spreadsheet. Every dollar I had spent on the renovation, fitted with receipts, contractor notes, permit, filings, even photos of the custom fixtures I had installed. This, I said calmly, is what I contributed to this home, to this family. No one moved. I turned to Melissa. She looked pale like a glass vase teetering on a ledge. Ava, what are you doing? You're tearing us apart. I tilted my head. No, Melissa. I just stopped holding us together. Then I looked at Derek, who was hurriedly trying to delete something on his phone. I pointed. Don't bother. Everything's backed up. Dad's voice broke. You used her, Carolyn. You used your own daughter. Mom slumped into a chair. She'll never forgive you, she said to me, low and sharp. I stared at her. I don't need her to, and I don't need you either. Then I walked to the front door, opened it. The night air flooded in. The party is over, I said. Please leave. Derek helped Melissa up. Dad didn't say a word. He just walked out slowly like his whole life had been edited in real time. Carolyn was the last to move. She stood slowly, brushed invisible lint from her dress, and whispered, You'll regret this, but I didn't. Because regret is what you feel when you stay too long, not when you finally leave. My home is nowhere they can reach. The house felt hollow after they left, like all the air had been sucked out, along with their voice, their laughter, their lies. I walked through each room slowly, my footsteps echoing against the polished floors I had installed. The silence wasn't peaceful yet. It was raw, like a wound that hadn't scabbed over, but it was mine. I stood in the kitchen, ran my fingers along the marble counter, and stared at the oven that had overcooked so many family dinners I made hoping someone would finally say thank you. I looked at the table they used to sit around without ever inviting me into their real conversations. That table, built with my hands, had seen too many shallow toasts and empty praise. So I left it behind. That night I packed only what belonged to me, my tools, my business files, a few childhood photos, and one chair I built when I was 19. Everything else I didn't want it, not the designer pillows Melissa picked out, not the china my mother reserved for guests she actually liked. I left it all as it was, a stage for people who mistook performance for love. By morning, I had moved into a small apartment downtown. It was nothing fancy, 2 rooms and a balcony that overlooked the streetcars and office buildings. But when I turned the key in the lock, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. I didn't need to check the energy in the room before speaking. I didn't need to tiptoe around someone else's mood. I just stood there barefoot on my own floor and breathed. I brewed a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the city wake up. And for once, I didn't wonder who needed me. I only wondered what I wanted. By the end of the week, I had changed my phone number and deactivated every social media account. The silence that followed was deafening and strangely beautiful, but it didn't last long. The emails started first. Carolyn, unsurprisingly, was furious. You're cruel, Ava. You've broken this family. You'll regret turning your back on us. Then came the guilt. It was all my fault. Melissa didn't know what she was saying. Bruce was just trying to protect our interests. Finally, the begging. Please come home. We can talk. I miss you. I love you. But love doesn't sound like blackmail, and home doesn't feel like a courtroom. I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. Then I blocked every number associated with them. I made it clear in one final message: all future communication must go through my legal representative. Do not contact me again. The next day, Melissa tried to reach out through my business email. Ava, I know things went too far, but we're still sisters. Bruce can help with legal filings if you're overwhelmed. Let's not throw everything away over one night. I didn't even flinch. I forwarded it. Restraining orders were filed before the sun set. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I was doing it because I finally understood that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you choose to lock to protect your peace. A few days later, I started setting up a mini workshop in my new living room. Nothing fancy, just a workbench, my saws, a set of chisels, and a roll of blueprints. The sound of wood splintering beneath the blade was the only music I needed. Some nights I stayed up late sketching, not contracts, not renovation bids. Dreams. A cabin on wheels that could take me anywhere, a studio with big windows and high ceilings, a life with no more roles to play, no more masks to wear. For the first time I created without asking Will, they approved. The only person I needed approval from was the woman staring back in the mirror. And even she didn't demand perfection. She only asked for honesty. In those quiet evenings, with the city lights blinking outside and the smell of sawdust lingering in the air, I started to feel something new, not triumph, Not revenge, just space, and in that space, I could finally hear myself think. I realized something that night as I wiped down my tools and turned off the lights. The house I built for them, it was beautiful, but the one I was building for me, it would be free and to the quiet sound of sanded wood. It started with one piece of cherry wood. I found it in a reclaimed lumber yard just outside Riverside, a deep red toned slab with rough edges and water stains. Most people would have passed it over, but I saw something in the grain. I brought it home, sanded it for hours until the lines became clearer, the shape more intentional. By the end of the week, it had become a bench for my tiny balcony. I sat on it every morning with coffee in hand, overlooking the city that once felt too large for someone like me. But not anymore. It wasn't just a bench. It was proof that I could still make something beautiful without anyone's permission, without sacrificing myself to do it. A few weeks later, a package arrived at my door. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My father's. Inside was a photo of a dining table he had built simple, wide planked, sturdy. No ornaments, just truth. With it came a note: "This is yours if you want it. There's space for it on your next blueprint, I hope." I stared at it for a long while, not because it made me emotional, though it did, but because I realized we were speaking in the only language we'd ever shared would. A few days later, I sent him back a picture of the bench I had made. "I saved a place for your table. Come see it when you're ready." That was all. No apologies, no confessions, just an understanding that some bonds, even when broken, can be reshaped not to their original form, but into something new, something functional, and maybe even stronger. Back in the apartment, I expanded my workshop. I accepted new commissions, custom shelving, minimalist coffee tables, reclaimed barnwood headboards. But I also carved time for my own projects. I dusted off old sketches I had hidden in a drawer for years, designs I once thought were too wild, too selfish, too unlike what Mom would approve of. I no longer cared for her approval, and with that freedom came design after design, unexpected curves, asymmetrical frames, furniture that didn't conform but still stood tall, like me. On weekends, I wandered into the community antique shops, local hardware stores, quiet cafes where no one knew my last name. I made small talk with other artisans, some older, some starting over just like me. They shared stories of rebuilding after bankruptcy, after divorce, after being left out of something they'd once poured everything into. We weren't tragic, we were just real. And there's nothing more powerful than a woman who decides to stop apologizing for being real. I still kept the tablet, the one with all the recordings, the photos, the spreadsheets. I never deleted it, but I also never opened it again. It wasn't a sword anymore. It was a stone at the bottom of a river, heavy, settled, no longer sharp. One evening, while finishing the initial sketches for my mobile cabin, a project I had dreamed of since college, I poured myself a glass of red wine and stepped out onto the balcony. The sun was dipping behind the skyline. The bench creaked gently beneath me. I traced my fingers along the grain of the wood, thinking how long it had taken to see myself as something more than functional, more than serviceable, worthy. That was the word that finally settled in my chest like a breath I'd been holding for decades. Not useful, not impressive, just worthy. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't need confetti or applause. What I felt was stillness, a quiet I had built for myself, one plank at a time. And as I looked out at the city glowing beneath me, I whispered, not in anger, not in grief, but with something close to peace. "You don't get to break me anymore. You never did." Then I rose, locked the door behind me, and turned off the lights in a home that needed no performance, just presence. In the silence they left behind, I didn't just rebuild you, Rose. Sometimes the quietest revolutions don't come with fireworks. They come with a woman folding laundry in her own apartment, a woman who walks barefoot across floors she paid for, not with money, but with years of swallowed pain. As the old proverb goes, they tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Ava didn't seek to destroy her family. She sought to reclaim herself, and in doing so, she reminded all of us that boundaries are not walls. They're bridges we choose not to let others cross anymore. If you've ever been the good one, the silent one, the one who gave, until there was nothing left, this story was for you. If it moved, you leave a comment, share your own chapter below, and subscribe to Revenge Stories 94. Every click, every sub helps us bring you more stories that don't just entertain, but heal. because here we don't just tell stories, we finish them.